Let's move over to another worrying issue. The appointment of Eskom's new board is being hailed by many as a step in the right direction. But not everyone shares the confidence. Senior banks analyst Nolwandle Mthombeni says we may see a break from power cuts, but warns the power giants has a bad history of great promises and hollow outcomes. To discuss this further, I am joined by the senior bank analyst Nolwandle Mthombeni. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Let's just start off with the fact that you are actually sitting in darkness because there's load shedding, and we actually have no indication of when this is actually going to end. A lot of the blame has been put at the door of the CEO, but also you have people on the other hand saying it's not the CEO's fault, it's years of mismanagement of the power utility and state capture. What is your view on this?
I think this is, actually the same sentiment. This has been ongoing now since 14 years now, 2007 when it started. And many of these problems were identified many years ago. And even under the new management, many of these issues were foreseen and expected to happen if the board and the management could move quickly enough. So these problems have been known for a long time. I think state capture compounded to the extent of it. And then what made it worse is just that there was obviously a lack of understanding to the extent of the problems that came due to state capture. So state capture obviously put in a big span in the works where, many people thought that they understood all the problems with Eskom, but under state capture, they were obviously much worse and they were exacerbated. And everyone had to get around the new set of problems that were posed because of it. So I very much agree with the sentiment that's shared and has been publicly been around for many, many years.
Yes, so we know what the problems are. We know that there has been state capture, there's been mismanagement of the power utility, there have been the wrong CEOs, the wrong board in place that didn't really have the best interest of the power utility. But what about finding solutions to actually deal with the energy crisis in this country? Because we have been subjected to the worst load shedding, possibly in the last 2 to 3 weeks, with stage 6 being implemented. That is of great concern, and it doesn't seem as though there's any end in sight when it comes to load shedding this time around, because we're told that we'll possibly have load shedding until Wednesday, but Wednesday comes and we might be told there'll be load shedding for another week or so. So essentially what I'm asking you is, why are we not implementing the solutions that have been put on the table time and time again?
So I think, the first problem is that Eskom itself as an entity is it's not capable of running independently. It has a shareholder being the government, which gets involved in many decisions around its running. So addition to that is that in terms of, just getting certain things through and improvements and, in terms of following the PFMA, there's many structural issues that are being sort of offset and being, hurdles that are coming through from working with government to get certain basic things done. If you think, for example, one basic example is the board, where there were many, many vacancies for many, many years, which were not filled, which was supposed to be filled by the Minister of Public Enterprises, but it wasn't. And then additionally, just many changes around procurement, and even the new power procurement has been, subject to government. So one big hurdle has been its shareholder being government in terms of even just the pace of getting things done, but also just a lot of red tape in terms of everything happening and their involvement. The second challenge is obviously if you have a new CEO coming in and they have to learn on the job. Not only do they have to get to grips in terms of the actual problems and the depth of problems, but they also have to be able to understand it well enough to be able to articulate it to not only government, the shareholder, but as well as the public. Because we've seen over the couple of years that in terms of the engagement of the public and the press conferences, they've increased to, create that communication with the public and more transparency under new management to show that, okay, we've cleaned up shop, got a new management team that is able to get in grips with what the problems are. So just being able to get to that level where you can engage with investors and shareholders and the public in general, a lot of knowledge needs to be gained, and it has been a steep learning curve. So those are two big factors that I think that has led to how we got here, where certain things that should have been implemented has been taking time, and there's been obstructions coming through to getting that done.
I want us to speak about the President's role in all of this, because he has been at the forefront. He's actually been previously the head of the Eskom war room and heading up that conversation. But many would say that he also doesn't really have the necessary power or capacity to bring about the necessary change. I mean, we've seen so many CEOs come in and out of Eskom. We've seen so many board members leave and new ones appointed, and now we have a new board. But what capacity and power does the president have in all of this? Because the severity of this energy crisis in the country, I don't think it's really understood, because it just seems as though it's getting worse, and it's almost as though there are no solutions. Well, there are solutions, but there's no political will to implement them. Your view on the president's role in all of this?
So we need to appreciate that the president himself is not necessarily, part of the day-to-day operations, or even following up or getting every minute following up with what's happening to the board and what's happening at Eskom. As the president, has to have knowledge of all the portfolios of all the departments and what's happening, and he won't be so close to the fact where he can tell you at any given time what has gone wrong or what is happening. Ultimately, there'll be feedback to him in terms of what's happening, and he is what places ministers in charge to sort these problems. So what his role would have been is to make sure that the ministers do what needs to be done, so that things like procurement from alternative energy sources is available. If there are policy obstacles, he should make sure that the ministers in the places they are in charge of this get through. So now we trying to scramble for additional power through renewable energy. Those red tapes, he should have communicated to the ministers in charge that this is a priority. In terms of priority, in terms of policy, it should have been harder on the ministers on the ground to say, look, let's get this through. Let's get this through. This is a priority, and let's forget other alternative conflicting interests and make sure this is done. So we understand that he obviously won't be involved into what happens. If there's a diesel shortage, those kind of things. It shouldn't be his problem, but he must make sure that he holds the ministers in charge accountable and make sure that at every point that they are doing what is required and that they're meeting their KPIs if there are even any.
Certainly, I just hope there is some kind of accountability, because this energy crisis is really out of control. But thank you so much for sharing your views with us, and I hope you get your power back sooner rather than later. I know you said your power is expected back at 6 o'clock, so we wish you all the best with that. That was senior bank analyst Nolwandle Mthombeni speaking to us about the crisis at Eskom.